Hello and welcome to the podcast. This is Ron's Amazing Stories, where we play tales to take you away from today. On the program today, you're in for some adventure.
That's awesome.
I agree. We have a sci-fi short story that challenges the current prison system.
Impossible. 2 ghost stories from you guys, and a brand new
Johnny, is this true?
Sent in by Darren Osborne.
It's amazing.
Add in another visit with Tom Williams, and well, it all begins with this 5-minute mystery.
Another 5-minute mystery.
This 5-minute mystery is being brought to you by... What? That's pretty much how I felt after hearing this story. I'm not going to tell you that I was confused and lost, but... oh, heck, I was confused and lost. But here's the story anyway.
Ladies and gentlemen of the masquerade, I address you as master of the revels. You have been asked to come here disguised in the roles you have all secretly longed for these many years. You are all strangers to one another, your identity known only to yourselves. You will remain within your secret selves till midnight, when you shall unmask and reveal your true selves. But for 3 hours, the mystery of the unknown is yours. I see all manner of people tonight. There is Misto the magician, a gypsy, a peasant, a statesman, a clown such as myself. And there is Cinderella, who at midnight will find that dreams must end. But till midnight, give yourselves to the music, the wine, and the dancing.
And there you have it. The magic of a sorcerer who jumped from apprentice to master in 10 easy lessons.
Oh, show us another, Misto.
Oh, I do not have the time. It is nearly midnight.
Can magicians stop time?
Not in the society I belong to.
Just one more, Misto. We've hardly seen you all night.
I've been walking the air searching for my inspiration.
Misto, come here quickly.
Forgive me, good people. The master of the rebels calls. What is it?
I was just walking in the garden, getting some air, and guess what I found?
How should I know? I'm only a magician.
The girl disguised as Cinderella. She's dead.
What?
What'll we do?
Look, it's almost midnight. Lock the body in a room until I get everyone to unmask. Don't let anyone suspect anything. Then we'll call the police.
Okay, I'll be right back.
It is almost midnight. Prepare to unmask.
Wonderful.
And as you reveal your real selves to one another, the royal prince will become a beggar, the peasant a wealthy man, the gypsy a statesman, the clown a respected philosopher, and Cinderella, poor Cinderella, her horse-drawn coach to become a pumpkin, the birthmark of poverty to show beneath her tired eyes. Midnight! Unmask! I, Misto the magician, stand revealed.
Yes, revealed as a murderer.
How does the clown know that Misto the magician is the murderer of the woman masquerading as Cinderella? In just a moment we'll know, but first...
Okay, while this story was well acted and entertaining, it lacked any kind of information. I would go so far as to say that it was a snippet of a bigger story of which we're left to guess. I have no idea how the clown knew that the magician was the killer, or how he did it. And I listened to it twice. So what do you say we go find out? Shall we?
And now, back to our story, The Masquerade. Are you out of your mind?
No, but you must have been, to let the proof of your guilt slip out.
You'd have a good case if you could prove it.
Why did you say birthmark of her poverty beneath her tired eyes? Why such a rich metaphor for Cinderella and a meager one for the others?
She interested me.
To the extent that you knew there was a birthmark beneath her right eye. You didn't know who she was. No one did. She remained masked all evening, yet you knew what lay beneath that mask. Don't tell me that was coincidence. You saw her unmasked.
Yes. Yes, I didn't mean to. It all happened so suddenly.
You should have perfected a disappearing act, friend. It would have stood you in good stead right now.
Well, at least we got a confession of guilt. No how, when, or even why. Just that he was interested in her. I'm guessing that this particular story didn't win any illustrious radio awards for gripping storytelling. But at least it was kind of fun, wasn't it?
What's that you say?
We have this email from Lana Becker of Washington, District of Columbia. Lana writes, Ron, best podcast there is, and I never miss it. You have a great voice and even better taste in stories. I have a question. How do you pick the stories for your show? Is there a method to the amazing stories you select? Lana. Well, Lana, not really. There's no method. A lot of the stories are suggested by you guys. I receive tips, some ideas, and sometimes some leads, but for most part, it's just luck of the draw, I guess. You know what really helps is the fact that you guys send in so many stories for me to choose from that it really is kind of easy to pick what we're going to hear next. So, Lena, I hope that answers your question. There is no method to the amazing stories I select. We have a second email that proves that not everyone is a fan. On emails such as these, I don't include the real name, but I want you to know that I do appreciate these as much as a glowing review. This one reads, Mr. Hood, your podcast is too silly for me and I won't be listening anymore. Also, you use bumper music way too much. I get tired of the lead-ins and outros. I think you're at your best when you're interviewing, but your guest selection is boring and simple-minded topics. I don't expect an answer to this. I doubt you'll even read it on the show. Signed, well, I'm going to say his name is Ralph. Well, Ralph, I do think there's some value in your opinion, but I just don't agree with it. I like doing music lead-ins because it helps with the pace of the show. Me just talking all the time would not show off the variety of the content, which is what I strive for. Show me another podcast that takes you to space, then growing up in Alabama, and ending up in the Pinchot Forest listening to Bigfoot calls. As for my guests on the show, I couldn't disagree with you more. I believe that I've yet to have a boring guest. But that's my opinion, and you're welcome to yours, and I do respect it. Thank you for sending in your note, and thank you for listening. And now a message for Gladdy's Goodies.
I'm Gladdy, the dachshund, the face of Gladdy's Goodies. Are you worried about your pet's health? My parents were too, especially since I developed pancreatitis. They couldn't find any treats I could eat, so they made some. Our natural treats are healthy for all dogs, with and without health issues. We have lots of delicious flavors like chicken, turkey, salmon, sweet potato, beef, and more. With our homemade treats, you won't worry about the contents because they have no chemicals, fillers, or bad ingredients. Go to GladysGoodies.com now to get your fur friend a bag. And pick them up some swag while you're there. You'll be glad you did. Remember, we have the treats and swag to make their tails wag. Again, that's GladysGoodies.com. Again, that's GladysGoodies.com.
Thank you, Gladys Goodies. It's time now for These Are Your Stories.
These are your stories, sent by you, for you.
story is a short from Joanna Gomez. Joanna did not include her location, but she writes, "Hello, Ron. Love the podcast and the stories. Don't ever stop. My story is a short one, but it still freaks me out today. A couple months ago, I bought a new cell phone. After a long day of work, I put my phone on the counter and went to watch TV. My son came in and asked if he could play with the phone. I told him not to call anyone or mess with the text messages, and he agreed. I fell asleep while watching TV, and when I woke up, I decided to go tuck him in and get my phone. I walked to his room and saw he wasn't there. Frantic, I ran all over the house, only to find him sleeping on my bed with the phone in his hand. Relieved, I picked up the phone. Browsing through it, I noticed only minor changes, such as a new background, banner, etc. But when I opened the save pictures, I saw that he had taken several, and I began deleting them until only one new picture remained. When I saw it, I was in disbelief. It was a photo of my son sleeping on my bed. The picture was taken by someone else above him, and it showed the left half of an elderly woman's face. I don't know how he could have ever faked it. He's only 8 years old. Also, you can clearly see both of his arms and that he was not holding the phone. I have this picture, and I'm willing to share it if you want to see. Joanna." Well, Joanna, I would love to see that picture. I tried to write you back, but my reply was rejected. If you are listening, please forward the picture to ronsamazingstories@gmail.com. That is one creepy story, and I have so many questions. This next story was sent in by Eric Vega from Las Vegas, Nevada. He calls his story Ghost Bro. My house was built in 1904. It is a single-family home, wood frame, setting on a concrete block foundation. We've been living here for about 12 years now. Of all the weird things that my siblings and I have seen or heard over the years, this one is my favorite, and it happened to my brother. About 10 years ago, he and his best friend started a garage band playing mostly Spanish rock, alternative music but in Spanish. His friends could only get together on Sunday afternoons. They would practice into the early evening, and then they would usually call it quits at 8 p.m. This was because I usually showed up and went to bed because of my work schedule. However, on this night, I had already left for work. It was late fall, so the days were getting shorter. They had just finished a long session when the decision to head to someone else's house came about. My brother handed his car keys to his buddy so that they could load up the equipment. Everyone was outside sitting in my brother's truck waiting for him. My brother was walking up the back stairs out the basement when he remembered that he had left his pancakes in a to-go container sitting on a speaker in the basement. He made the decision to go back. Now, our basement doesn't have full sight lines. There have been partitions made, and the boiler and main heating unit are right smack in the middle of the room. So my brother walks back. He's about to retrieve his food container when out of the corner of his eye, he sees it. It's a shadowy figure right at his peripheral vision. As I mentioned, we're not unaccustomed to strange things going on in the house, but at that moment, a feeling of dread and uneasiness washed over him. We've always been taught that if you're in the presence of a spirit or ghost and you felt a bad vibe, to say a quick prayer or cuss at it. My brother chose the latter. He basically just told it, "Hey, screw you, I don't have time for this stuff." Editor's note, I cleaned the language a bit on that. My brother started to walk to the back of the basement and briskly up the stairs, closing the doors and turning off the light as he was walking out. He said he felt something at his back, but at no point did he turn around. As he stepped up, still holding his food container in one hand, he jogged down the porch's few steps and walked towards the front gate. He kind of smiled and thought things over in his head, mad at himself for spooking himself out when there was no reason. He climbed into the driver's side of the truck, put on his seatbelt, and was getting ready to pull out of the driveway when one of his friends asked, "Hey, what about your brother? Isn't he coming with us?" He answered, "What do you mean? He went to work early tonight. He's already gone." The next question they asked was, "So then, who was that walking behind you when you were leaving the house?" Eric Vega, Las Vegas, Nevada. Nice. What a great story and nicely told. I do apologize for the edit, but this is a family podcast. I'm guessing by your story that you may have a few more of them. I, for one, would love to hear more about this Las Vegas home. If you want to hear your story on the show, just do it. Head to ronsamazingstories.com, click on the story submission banner, and type your story. That's all it takes. However you do it, please get your stories in. The people want to hear it.
Johnny, is this true?
Okay, I like to surf the internet looking for stories and other oddities. I do this in the name of the podcast, but the truth is, it's fun to see what's out there. What you're about to hear is what I call...
Johnny, is this true?
I will tell you a story and then ask the question, did I make it up or is it true? Let's get started. This time on
Johnny, is this true?
we turn our attention to space and exploration. How well do you know your solar system? Let's find out. Story 1. It is a fact that all the planets in our own little group rotate around the sun and each rotate on its axis. However, could it be true that Uranus rotates on its side? Or am I full of blue gas? If you said it does, then you got it right. Uranus appears to be a featureless blue ball upon first glance, but this gas giant of the outer solar system is pretty weird upon closer inspection. First, the planet rotates on its side for reasons science haven't fully figured out. The most likely explanation is that it underwent some sort of titanic collision in the ancient past. In any case, the tilt makes Uranus quite unique among the solar system planets. Story 2. It's said that only Saturn has visible rings. However, I'm here to tell you that isn't true. The far-off planet Uranus has its own set of rings. Now, am I just making this up, or are we talking fact here? Well, if you said fact, you are correct. It was confirmed when the planet passed in front of a star from Earth's perspective in 1977. As the starlight winked on and off repeatedly, astronomers realized that there was more than just a planet blocking its starlight. More recently, astronomers spotted several storms in Uranus's atmosphere after its closest approach to the sun, when the atmosphere would have been heated the most. How about that? Story 3. The Earth is known for its fantastic volcanoes, which even have been seen erupting from space. But would it surprise you to know that Io, one of Jupiter's moons, is the site of even more exciting volcanic disturbances? Now, am I making this up? Well, for those of us used to Earth's relatively inactive moon, Io's chaotic landscape may come as a huge surprise. The Jovian moon has hundreds of volcanoes and is considered the most active moon in the solar system, sending up plumes of up to 250 miles into its atmosphere. Some of our spacecraft have even caught the moon erupting. The Pluto-bound New Horizon caught a glimpse of Io bursting when it passed by in 2007. Story 4. Speaking of volcanoes, which planet do you think has the largest on record? Surely it must be Jupiter. It truly is a massive planet and must have the biggest and best volcano that the solar system has to offer. Right? Wrong. While Mars seems quite quiet now, we know that the past something caused gigantic volcanoes to form and erupt. This includes Olympus Mons, the biggest volcano ever discovered in the solar system. At 374 miles across, the volcano is comparable to the size of Arizona. It's 16 miles high, or triple the height of Mount Everest, the tallest mountain on Earth. How about that? Well, that's the end of our quiz. I hope you enjoyed this edition of Johnny, Is It True? Those facts were sent in by Darren Osborne from Austin, Texas. I want to thank Darren for taking the time and writing that entire segment. However, of the bits that I've had to record for the show, that one was a bit of a challenge. Rather than explain why, well, I'll let you be the judge. Here is a Ron's Amazing Stories outtake. The most likely explanation is that it underwent some sort of titanic collision in the ancient past. In any case, the tilt makes Uranus quite unique among the solar system planets. Story 2. Sticking with Uranus. Story 2. I don't think I can say this. Story 2. Sticking with Uranus, it is said that only Saturn has visible rings. Okay. Story 2. It's said that only Saturn has visible rings. However, I'm here to tell you that isn't true. The far-off planet Uranus has its own set of rings. Now, am I just making this up, or are we talking fact here? Well, Darren, you probably noticed that I had to change just a little bit what you wrote. I do apologize, but I really don't think I would have made it through any other way. Thank you again for sending in the segment. It truly was, well, interesting. This time I think we have what I believe is a truly amazing story. Here's the tagline from the Pulp Mags. Adam Slade was a man who had nothing to lose by making a break for it. The trouble was, he knew that no one had ever escaped from the prison of 1 billion years. Sound like a good story? I thought so when I read it. Our story first appeared in the April 1956 edition of Imagination Science Fiction, and it was written by C.H. Thames. More about him later. After a bit of a search, I found that not only was the story copyright free, but our very own Mark Nelson had recorded it for LibriVox.org. If you remember back, Mark read Anything You Can Do for us not too long ago. The story is rich with adventure, read by one of the best storytellers I know, and is called Prison of a Billion Years.
Adam Slade crushed the guard's skull with a 2-foot length of iron pipe. No one ever knew where Slade got the iron pipe, but it did not seem so important. The guard was dead. That was important. And Slade was on the loose, with a hostage. That was even more important. The hostage's name was Marcia Lawrence. She was 22 years old and pretty and scared half out of her wits. She was, before she became a hostage, a reporter for Interplanetary Video. She had been granted the final pre-execution interview with Adam Slade, and she had looked forward to it a long time, but it had not worked out as planned. It had not worked out as planned because Slade, only hours from the execution chamber, with absolutely nothing to lose, had splattered the guard's brains around the inside of his cell and marched outside with a frightened Marcia Lawrence. Outside the cell block, while other condemned prisoners roared and shouted and banged tin cups on bars and metal walls and Judas-hole grills. Outside the prison compound and across the dome-enclosed city which served the prison. Then, outside the dome. Outside the dome there was rock. Rock only. Twisted and convoluted and thrusting and gigantic, like monoliths of a race of giants. Rock alone under the awesome gray sky. Steaming rock, for some of the terrestrial waters were still trapped at great depths, and the sea far off, booming against rocky headlands, hissing tidally and slowly, in an age-long process, pulverizing the rock. The sea far off, a clean sea, not sea-smelling sea, a sea whose waters must evaporate countless times and be borne up over the naked rocks in vapor and clouds, and come down in pelting, endless rain, and rush across the rock, frothing and steaming, a sea which must do this countless times in the eons to come, and would do it to bring salinity to its own waters. "It kind of scares the hell out of you, doesn't it?" Adam Slade said. He was a big man with a thick neck and heavy, sleepy-looking eyes, and a blue beard shadow on his stubborn jaw. He said those words as he climbed out of the prison tank with Marcia Lawrence. The tank's metal was still warm from overheated travel. "I didn't think anything would scare you," Marcia Lawrence said. She had conquered her initial terror in the 5 hours of clanking tank flight from the prison. They had come a great many miles from the prison dome, paralleling the edge of the saltless sea, and then, finally, when their fuel was almost gone, clanking and rattling down toward the sea. She was a newspaper woman, that above all now. She must not be afraid. She had a story here. A story. "Get moving," Adam Slade said. "I've got nothing against you, lady," he told her for the 10th time. "But you try anything, you're dead. You get that? I got nothing to lose. 1 time is all they can kill me. But first they got to find me, and they won't be able to take me as long as you're here. Just stay meek, and you'll stay alive." "How long do you think you can hold out?" Marcia Lawrence asked practically. They had begun to walk away from the now useless tank. Adam Slade was carrying the dead guard's M-gun in the crook of his bent left arm and walking with long, easy, ground-consuming strides. Marcia almost had to run to keep up with him as they went down a stretch of slightly sloping black rock toward the steaming, hissing, pounding, roaring, exploding surf. Slade smiled. "Plenty of water," he said. "But no food, Mr. Slade. There is absolutely no food on Earth now, and no possible way of getting food, unless you want to stick around for a few million years." You think I came out here without a plan? Slade asked with some hostility. I don't know. You were desperate. As long as you're with me, I figure they might follow, but they won't rush me. They might even send over a copter, but it won't try anything. Not with you here. Desperate? I'm not desperate, and don't you forget it. Desperate, you don't think straight. Once is all they can execute me. I stayed behind, they'd have done it. If they catch me, they'll do it. What's the difference? You said you had a plan. They reached the edge of a thrusting headland, an enormous beak-shaped cliff of beetling black rock which leaned out over the young, still saltless ocean. Slade paced back and forth quickly, with a powerful leonine grace, until he found a fault in the rock. The fault tumbled jaggedly, steeply down almost to the edge of the sea. "Down there," Slade said. "We'll follow the sea coast back to the prison." "Back?" Marcia said in disbelief. "Hell yes, back. You said it yourself. There's no food out here. Since there ain't no life, of course there's no food. Oh, it's a great place for a prison, all right. Whoever thought of it ought to win a prize. A prison, 1,000,000,000 years in the past. What's the word?" "Archaeozoic," she supplied. "Yeah, Archaeozoic. An Archaeozoic prison. You can escape to your heart's content, but what the hell's the difference? There's no life back here, not yet. The Earth's just a baby. So you escape and you starve to death. It makes every maximum security jail before this one look like a kid's piggy bank." "There hasn't ever been an escape," Marcia said hopefully, as they made their way down to the sea, she in front and Slade behind her with the M-gun. "There ain't never been a hostage before." "No. There's a hostage now." Marcia Lawrence took a deep breath and asked suddenly, "Are you going to kill me?" "Hell, I don't know. I got no reason to, unless you make me. We're going back there. We're double-tracking along the beach, get me? Back to the prison dome." "But—" "Adam Slade won't starve to death out here. We'll double back to the dome and the time machine." "Oh," she said. They began to walk along the edge of the sea, its water sullen gray, mirroring the sky. Here on this dawn Earth, the sky has yet never been blue, for the primordial waters were still falling. It rained almost all the time, and the air was thick with moisture, and every night when the sun, as yet unseen by the dawn Earth except as an invisible source of light, went down and darkness came, the mists rolled in from the sea. In the morning, whether rains had fallen or not, the ground was soaked and tiny freshets rushed down to the sea, returning to it. "Look out!" he cried suddenly, and shoved her against the base of the cliff which overlooked the water. The cliff top thrust out over them umbrella-wise. The base of the cliff was thus a concavity, and they pressed themselves against it now in a shadow. The waters of the infant sea were 100 yards away, surging and booming against the rock. She heard it soon after he did. A helicopter. She wanted to scream. She wondered if they would hear her scream. But she looked at Adam Slade's face and did nothing. Soon the helicopter came, buzzing low over them, searching. It circled a great many times because the abandoned tank was there. It circled and came down on the beach, and 2 uniformed figures got out. Now she really wanted to scream. One sound, and they would hear her. One quick filling of the lungs, and— Adam Slade hit her suddenly and savagely, and the black loomed up at her, but she did not remember striking it. When she awoke, the helicopter was gone. "Sorry I had to poke you one," Slade said. He did not seem sorry at all. He said it automatically, and then added, "You ready to walk?" She nodded. She got up, and staggered a few steps before her legs steadied under her. Then, with Slade, she walked down along the rocky beach. This, she thought, was a story. It was the only big story she had ever had, and probably she would not live to write it. As a woman, she was almost hysterical with fear, but as a videocaster, she was angry. The story was hers, if she lived to tell it. Then she had to live. Time prison. Sure, she thought, utterly escape-proof, unless someone like Slade could take a hostage, double back to the prison dome, the hermetically sealed dome, and somehow trick or overpower the guards who watched the time-traveling machine outside the prison dome. Outside. Naturally it would be outside. That way the prisoners couldn't get at it. Unless, like Slade, they too were outside. Outside, where life had not yet been born. Outside, the infant earth. Let a man escape. What did his escape matter? He would live exactly as long as it took a man, reasonably healthy, to starve to death. Unless he had a hostage and a plan. She became aware of rain when they left the cliff overhang. There was almost no wind, and the rain came down slowly at first, huge, slow drops which splattered on the black rock. "If it gets any harder," Slade said, "we'll have to duck under the cliff for protection. You don't know what a rain can be like back here. I seen them through the dome." But they couldn't go under the cliff for protection, not if they wanted to keep going. For the cliff dropped suddenly in a wild jumble of rocks, and then there was nothing but the sloping black beach, sloping down to the sea. Then, all at once, someone opened the sluice gates and the rain bombarded them. It slapped and bounced off the rock like pistol shots. It struck them like hammers. They staggered under its weight. "We'll have to go back to the cliffs!" Marcia cried. She yelled it again at the top of her voice, because she realized Slade would not hear her otherwise as the rain cracked and exploded and splattered and crashed. There were no droplets of water, for each one had the size and shape and weight, swift-falling, hammering weight as it came down. Each one, Marcia thought wildly, struggling to keep her feet, was the size of your clenched fist there in the gray dawn of Earth. "The cliffs!" she cried again. But Adam Slade shook his head, grabbed her arm above the wrist, and pulled her after him. He pointed ahead, in the direction they had been going. He said nothing. There was no need to talk. They were going forward, and if it killed them, probably Adam Slade did not care much. He wanted that prison time machine for his escape, and he was either going to get it or die in the attempt. They went on slowly. First one would fall, and then the other, and when it was Slade who had fallen, she would wait patiently, hopefully, if he ever released his hold on the M-gun. But if it were Marcia who fell, Slade would yank her to her feet savagely, yelling words which she had heard at first, but which after a while, after an eternity of the storm, seemed to merge with the sound of the rain and the far booming of thunder out over the water. And then, as if by magic, she was walking again and stumbling along with Slade, drenched and beaten and half drowned. She hardly remembered when night came, but presently she was aware of the darkness, and the mist over the sea and over the rock and now engulfing them with its white ectoplasmic tendrils. In the mist she knew she could escape Slade, and yet she did not. Without Slade now in the middle of nowhere, there by the sea on the shores of the young Earth, she would die in the storm. With Slade, at least for now, was life, and she went on. The thunder followed them and came closer. In the middle of the night, it sounded like artillery at a distance of half a mile, like a barrage of big atomic shells just out of sight behind a black ridgeline which wasn't there. And through the deeper rain-wet darkness of early morning, through the mist, tearing the mist to tatters, shredding it, came the spears and forks and lances of lightning. It was, Marcia thought, a nightmare of a storm, and she must remember it, for it would make a story, a real story, if ever she lived to tell it. By morning, the air smelled of ozone. It reeked of ozone, and around them, as the gray light seeped out of the wet sky, and the rain suddenly slackened as if the weak daylight dispelled it, the black rocks were blasted and broken where the lightning had struck. In the dawn's first light, another helicopter came. "Get down!" Slade shouted, and they dropped among the blasted black rocks, hiding there, not moving. The helicopter came on through the slackening rain, buzzing a few 100 feet over them, but not circling. It was heading for the abandoned tank, Marcia thought. It wasn't looking for them here. But suddenly the rain came down in all its savage force again, blinding, bounding off the rocks, pounding relentlessly. Overhead, the helicopter seemed to pause like a bird stricken in flight. The rotors whirled a silver shield against the rain, the great drops splattering off the shield. And the helicopter came down under the weight of the rain. It landed 150 yards from them down the beach, and Marcia watched breathlessly while 3 men got out and looked at each other and at the rain. The dawn light was still only a dim gray, and Marcia could not see the men clearly. But abruptly, a jagged spear of lightning blasted rock midway between where they were hiding and the helicopter, and in the afterglare, through the wet and almost crackling air, the men were very clear. And clearer still when other lightning came down around them, ringing them in, it seemed, like a tent. There was now so much lightning it looked more like an aurora than an electric storm. The dawn earth before life spending itself in fury. All at once, Marcia was running down toward the edge of the water, where the helicopter was. She ran screaming and shouting, but the thunder swallowed her puny voice. At every moment she expected Adam Slade to kill her, to merely stand up with the M-gun and shoot her. But he did not, and perhaps her unconscious mind in the instant she had fled had instinctively known he would not. For if Adam Slade killed her, he had no hostage. If he killed her and they found him, he would have absolutely no chance. She turned and looked behind her. There was Slade, silhouetted against the lightning, running, covering the ground in huge strides, gaining on her. She did not look back again. The whole world was lightning and thunder, and her legs striking earth under her, up and down, pounding, running, fleeing, and the rain, Slade's ally, beating her, buffeting her, exploding against her. She stumbled and fell, but she was up and running again in a moment. Now Slade was very close, but the helicopter was close too. She did not think the men there had seen them yet. She waved her arms and screamed, although she knew the screams would not be heard. And then Slade was on her. They went down together, and she knew she was frail and helpless before his great strength. He grabbed her, his hands, angry hands on her throat, and lightning struck. It bounded and bounced off rock a dozen feet from them. It shook the earth and blasted the rock, and pieces like shrapnel cluttered all around them, and struck them too, and Marcia felt hot blood on her arm, and it was her own blood. But Slade had been momentarily stunned, and she was running again, away from him. But away from the helicopter too. At first she did not realize that, but when she did realize it, it was too late. If she doubled back now, she would rush into Slade's arms. She ran into the sea. It was suddenly, unexpectedly calm. It merely eddied around her ankles, as if waiting for something. The storm seemed to be waiting too, lightning holding back, the thunder stilled, even the rain hanging there in the black, heavy sky waiting. Slade came after her, stalking through the surf. A single bolt of lightning lanced down at them, and a great engulfing roar lifted Marcia, carried her, stunned her, and then the rain pelted down again, and the sea was an angry sea, and the air was supercharged with ozone and another smell, like seared flesh. She saw Adam Slade then. Slade was down in a foot of water, face down. He was not moving, and the water lapped around him, over him. She went to him, walking slowly. The men from the helicopter were there, too. They had seen in that final flash of lightning. "Are you all right, miss?" one of them shouted. "Yes. Slade?" They turned him over. They looked at him. "Dead," one of them said. "Dead," she echoed. She would have collapsed, but they caught her. Then the rain really came down, not as it had come before, which was hard enough. It came in huge globes of water, and each globe was as big as your head, and if it hit, it could stun you. "Slade!" someone cried as the globes exploded violently in the surf around them. "He's dead. He'll keep." And they went back to the helicopter with Marcia to await the end of the storm there. When it was over, when the sky was not black, but merely the color of lead, they returned down the beach for Slade's body. But Slade wasn't there. "But he was dead," Marcia said incredulously. One of the men smiled. "He didn't go any place under his own power. He was dead, all right. The storm took his body out to sea, is all." They stood there for a moment, gazing out across the black, troubled water of the infant ocean on the infant Earth. 1,000,000,000 years ago. Slade was out there. Slade, dead. Out there, with the tides and the waters and the frequent electric storms. Out there, with 1,000,000 bacteriological parasites on his dead body and in his dead body, which he brought with him, Marcia said dreamily. "What are you talking about, miss?" "Out there, in the electric dawn of Earth, with the bacteria which lived in his body as they lived in all other bodies. Out there with them, dead. Food for them. Food and water and air heavy with ozone and the electric storms." Marcia laughed hysterically. It was a story she wanted to write. But she wouldn't write it. Slade was a killer, condemned to die. But Slade, dead out there with his bacteria. Slade, evil to man and human society, but not necessarily evil in the implacable ways of nature, or perhaps grimly, terribly evil. Slade, out there, dead on the bosom of the primordial waters. Slade, back in time 1,000,000,000 years before life had been born on Earth. She laughed hysterically as they led her away from the water. They slapped her face, gently at first, then harder. "I'll be all right," she managed to say. She would be all right. She could live to forget it. But Slade, out there. Slade. Slade, fathering all life on Earth, there in the sea with his dead body. Slade, who had sinned and was taken back here to die for his sins, so that life could be born. Slade, whose first name was Adam.
Did you like that story? I did. I thought it was quite clever. The core idea is fascinating, combining the possibility of time travel with the continuing problem of what to do with those who commit crimes. Confining them to the most remote parts of the past provides an inescapable solution. Or does it? Prison of 1,000,000,000 Years was credited to C.H. Thames. However, his real name was Stephen Marlowe, but he was born into this world as Milton Lesser. Confused? He was an American author of science fiction, mystery novels, and fictional autobiographies. Milton is best known for his detective character Chester Drum, who he created in the 1955 novel The Second Longest Night. He wrote under many aliases, including Adam Chase, Andrew Fraser, C.H. Thames, Jason Ridgway, and believe it or not, Ellery Queen. He was drafted into the Army and served during the Korean War. He was awarded the Lifetime Achievement Award by the Private Eye Writers of America. He also served on their board of directors. How about that? And thank you, Milton. Growing up. We've all had to do it, or at least are trying to work on it. Some of us may never really accomplish it, and for others it is faded away too soon. Tom Williams, well, he's a lucky man. He lives in Berlin, Germany, was raised in Alabama, and sends in these tales from his youth. On Growing Up this time, Tom tells us that real life can be better than going to the movies in a story he calls Growing Up.
Better than a Saturday movie. Sometimes there are things that are better than a Saturday movie and less expensive. Now, when I think back on this one particular Saturday, I don't know why I was going to the movies alone, particularly without any of my cousins, but that was the way it was on that day. The two movie houses were several blocks east of my aunt's apartment, and it was a nice day to walk, so I set off. In those days, as I've mentioned before, there were not so many cars on the street as there are today. Therefore, this incident shouldn't really have happened. A few blocks from the apartment, I stopped at the curb before crossing the street. Off to my right, a car pulled up and stopped at the stop sign. The cars in the 50s had huge trunks and, in general, were very large vehicles. Suddenly, another car rammed into the stopped car. The driver of the rammed car got out and went to the back to see how much damage was done. Well, there were minor damages, as I could see, but there was a clear liquid pouring from under the trunk. I thought it may have been a ruptured gas tank. The driver of the car that rammed the stopped car was very apologetic and said he would, of course, pay for the damages. Nothing was wrong with his vehicle that I could see. Then the strangest thing happened. The car that was damaged at the stop sign, with liquid pouring ever more from the trunk, pulled out not a gun, but a roll of $100 bills. So much money I've never seen in my life, and he offered the driver of the car that hit him the money. The man who caused the accident was an honest man and didn't want anything to do with this windfall. "Sir, I can't take this. I owe you for the damages." And with serious bantering back and forth, the two drivers didn't notice the city police pulling up behind them. Now, noticing that things weren't right, the officer looked at the damaged car with the liquid still pouring out of the trunk and asked the driver, with a handful of money still, to open the trunk. There, you guessed it, was a ruptured stainless steel tank for hauling moonshine. The rest you can guess yourself. See what I mean? Sometimes real life is much more interesting than a Saturday movie, at least for a kid. That was the South for you. Sincerely, Tom.
Well, Tom, you finally have done it. That is a story that I can't relate to, but it sure is humorous. I can honestly say it doesn't remind me of anything in my childhood. Moonshine has never really been a thing here in Washington. For us, it's always been about growing marijuana, which, for the record, is legal now. I want to thank you, Tom. You know, and I know, that you're the best.
to the end of the podcast. I want to thank Lana Becker, Ralph, Joanna Gomez, Eric Vega, Darren Osborne, and Tom Williams for their contributions this time. You guys are making the wheels of the bus go round. If you want to follow the podcast or the blog, just head to ronsamazingstories.com. There you'll find everything you need. Do you want to help the show? Please leave reviews and feedback. It really helps us to grow. Thank you for listening, and I hope you come again to find out what are Ron's Amazing Stories.
All of the vintage audio used in the podcast is believed to be in the public domain. Ron's Amazing Stories does not own the rights to any of the old-time radio used here. If you hold the rights to any of the shows played, please contact us immediately at ronsamazingstories.com.